Hello, YouTube. My name is James Baker, and I'm here with my co-host Joaquin Rosales for our second weekly U.S. immigration talk on the U.S. Tax Foundation YouTube channel, and hopefully, and now Facebook page. So we're really happy to have you here to answer all of your questions about U.S. immigration, and then if you want to sneak in tax questions, I'm here for that too. So if you're here live, ask any questions you want. And if you are watching this later, post your questions later. How you doing, Joaquin? How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good, pretty good. How about yourself? Happy Monday.
I'm just out here doing great,
Celebrating
man.
Astros.
Happy Monday. The Stros won, so we're really happy in Houston, and
That's good.
a lot of a lot of stuff going on. So it's weird doing this every week because I feel like I'm answering a lot of questions, but since this is your realm, you are really the one with most of the questions because people are really asking you most of the immigration questions every day. Do you have some questions that you got last week that you want to go over?
Yeah, well, like as we always say, immigration. There's just so many different things to do and apply, and visas, and just basically the immigration world is just filled with things. So you're always getting, questions about it. We're having a lot of people from Brazil, um,
What's
asking.
the okay? So, what's the most common visa that people from Brazil will qualify for?
What's the most common visa that people from Brazil will qualify? It really depends on the profile of the person. Like we discussed before, immigration is really based on what kind of visa you want to apply. They have visas, that are based on your talents and your experience and what you do as a professional. The other ones are just based on investment, and the other ones are based on employment. But you see a lot of influx right now of people from Brazil who want to either do some sort of a investment visa, or they want to do a sort of talent-based visa. Brazilians are very knowledgeable of, for example, the EB1 and the EB2 NIW because it has been promoted a lot recently in the past couple of years. Just as you know, every single time we have some sort of an election or some sort of political change in South America, we always get, a percentage of people who, really want to see their options or want to sort of make a change. So right now the elections just happened in Brazil. So just like it happened with Colombia, we're seeing a little bit more of an uptake of people who are, asking what will be the best visas for us, right? But once again, there's a plethora of visas out here. But for Brazilians, they're very well versed on the EB1 and EB2 NIW. It's a lot of professionals over there, just like there are in the
So,
entire world. But
so
we
what's
get
your so let me narrow that down for you. So, what's your when you get a new client, what do you ask them to determine what's the best visa for them? What's your process for determining the best visa for a new
sure.
client or a person you're working with?
Yeah, sure. So the approach to see what would be the best visa for a particular client, I always say basically the exact same thing. I explain to them, there's essentially in general four routes, to come to the United States. Within those four routes, there could be dozens of visas, but essentially the four routes are family based. You have families over here that can petition for you. Then there's employment based, that is essentially companies are have a huge demand for employees and they can't find employees, so they're petitioning for foreigners in order to fill in those spots, right? You have investment based, which is essentially, just like the word it says, right? You need to invest depending on which visa, certain amount of money, or depending on whether or not you're, the national of a certain country. And then sort of on the fourth realm, I guess. It's the talent-based ones that we were just talking about, where you're essentially just telling the government that your talent, your profession, your experience, your education is so elevated that you are a person of interest to the United States, and they should allow you to be here. There's all the visas, obviously, in all the ways that you can sort of come in here. I mean, depending on which country as well, right? Like, I mean, you could have came in here, with a tourist visa, and then all of a sudden, Venezuela got TPS, so now you're able to apply for TPS, and a lot of them have, right? There's other ones that deal with whether or not you were a victim of a crime and you helped out law enforcement, and then even regardless of how you enter the country, if you're successful at sort of aiding law enforcement in order to sort of apprehend or prosecute a criminal, then that's another form. You know, people who have been abused by either American residents or any other person as well. There's some paths, and not a lot of people know about asylum, although asylum is a whole
Well,
different
tell
ball.
me. So I'm gonna cut you off again and then switch to another thing because I'm just gonna ask you questions. You're gonna be talking the whole time. If you have any follow up questions for me, definitely ask so we can break it up too. Because I don't want to just be just like priming you for a question after you talk the whole time, even though that's great for me. But regarding the asylum stuff, how is that going? I want to know the how long does it take to get an asylum approved, and then how long does it last for? Just like those simple things.
Well, the asylum situation right now is it's a mess in terms of processing. There is a huge backlog. I think last time that we were together, I explained to you that the executive have full control over the immigration processes and administrative processes, including the ones in immigration court. So the previous administration did a lot of things that sort of slow down the process. And also, there's a huge influx of people who are applying for asylum. So you essentially can do two things, right? You're either put in what is called removal proceedings, right? Or you come in, say, with a tourist visa, um, as an example, and you apply affirmatively. So when you apply affirmatively, that means that you're actually sending it out to a government entity that is called USCIS. It's just an officer. They review it. They're taking years. A lot of them are taking years, especially down here. And then if you, for example, get denied, then what they do is they refer you to an immigration judge and immigration court, and that could also take years. So we're talking about in some instances people who have been waiting 6 years in order to have the entire process.
Six
Uh,
years. So are they in the U.S.
Final.
while they're waiting?
Yeah, they're in the UAs. I mean, there was also a policy that was implemented where that some people had to wait in Mexico. They sort of stopped it, but then this administration sort of tried to bring it back. So it's back and forth when it comes to all that right now. But in terms of people who are already inside, there's a huge backlog. And asylum gives you the opportunity to wait until the process is done, and does give you a work permit after you've waited for about 6 months. So, a lot of people will just get the work permit and then just sort of wait until the process is over. But to answer your question, it really, there's a huge delay in the asylum process, and not too many people are going to be approved. It's for asylum is very
They don't get
specific.
approved. It's not as easy to
Yeah,
get.
well, I mean, and it's really once again, like I told you before, right? So like the executive, each administration can interpret, law that has been sort of settled, by the typical president, legal president, right? And they can switch it up and say, no, this doesn't apply anymore. So that sort of obviously didn't help out a lot of petitions, but essentially asylum, and you have to demonstrate that you're being persecuted in your country and you're afraid of going back because you'll be persecuted based on your religion, your political association, your race, whether you're part of a particular group, like let's say if you're gay or something like that. So then there was a lot of people who, for example, in Venezuela, let's say, you could be against the government, right? You could be against whatever policies that government, is doing in their country, right? But if you can't prove that they are persecuting you specifically, right, as a person, the government for your political associations, and that doesn't really, fit within one of those definitions of what's persecution or what's considered what type of persecution is considered worthy of be given an asylum, right? So I feel like there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be disappointed because even though yes they left, say, horrible conditions, political instability in a country, in their country, that doesn't mean that the government in itself was going directly after them, right? Now of course there are people who are persecuted, are harassed, horrible things were have been done to their families. They continue to be harassed, threatened, and all that. but that doesn't mean that everybody is, right? So
Hmm.
there's a huge backlog in the terms of asylum and that, and we'll
What
see
a
what
mess, man. And
happens.
these people are like in really tough straits, man, tough
Yeah,
conditions. And
for sure.
um, I want to shift gears a little bit because I have a question, and this is like really just like private education for James. All these videos, right? So, my question is, how do people use student visa? No, I'm gonna ask. I want to ask about student visas, but I want to frame my question the right way. I want to say, how common is it for people to use a student visa to come into the U.S. to see if they like it, especially before making a big investment or being from a wealthy family? Like, how often is a student use is a student visa a great way to see the U.S. and how does it really work?
Yeah, absolutely. The student. I mean, we as immigration attorneys don't like to say that anything in immigration is simple, but I mean, in the whole spectrum of immigration, they tend to fall into the easier processes, right? And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a great way to not only come to the country, see if you like it, and obviously get yourself an education, but at the same time, typically they're giving you, prolonged times in order to stay here. Typically, let's say if you come in with towards a visa, they'll give you like 6 months. But if you're coming in here for a program, it could be a 4 year program, it could be a 2 year program, it could be a year and a half program, depending on what it is that you're studying. So that gives you flexibility to be here for a longer time. Obviously, process the culture, see if you like it. But on a more important note, on the immigration side of it, you have to do, if you're inside the United States and you want to switch up to a different visa to stay here longer or to actually maybe become a resident and stay here permanently, everything has to be within the time frames that they gave you originally once you come in, right? So, for example, a person who came in with a tourist visa would have more of a limited, option base, because they don't have too much time to process other visas, right? Whereas, for example, if you're a student and say you are, I don't know, you're a sophomore in college, and then you start a process of, say, I don't know, you get an offer from a company that wants to do a labor certification for you. We're talking about like a 18-month period. Well, then you have enough
Hmm.
time to do all of that within the United States, right? You're finishing up your school, you're going through your process, you're doing all that. The same thing with, say, you want to do an E2, which is an investment visa. Then you can be here as a student, and as you're, continuing your education, you can also process, say, another type of visa, at the same time, right? So, but
Oh,
that,
so you can do multiple types. Okay, that's great, and that's a good way to get in. And I'm gonna comment too because I have actually this is a really good question because I need to know this answer too. Um, how does USCIS communicate with the IRS, and do they at all? So if you come into the US on a non-work visa and then you're working and you pay taxes on it, does USCIS find out about that? Like how do you think that works?
there
Because I'm
isn't
only speculating.
there isn't a centralized system, right, where they just go in, and say everything's connected. But an officer does have the power to investigate further, right? So one thing that they'll know for sure is they'll have some access to, say, taxes. So like a lot of the questions in terms of, for example, if you want to become a citizen or something like that, right? Whether or not you've done your taxes, right? Here. So I mean, they'll be able to find out, pretty quickly, right? That's why you have to always be extremely transparent and honest to the officers about whether or not you paid your taxes or not. And even if you haven't, so long as you have some sort of an arrangement with the IRS, that's all they care about, right? So you could be owing a lot of, taxes or whatever, or you're dealing with some issues, but so long as you have an arrangement with the IRS, immigration, typically is okay with that, right? Um,
Okay.
but they don't have a centralized system where, like, they just, sort of, okay, you're doing this application, and all of a sudden all this information pertaining to the IRS pops out. If there's something that looks extremely sort of, that something that makes the officer uneasy, I mean, he does have the tools to try to dig deeper and try to see what's going on. But I mean, it's not something that common unless it's something really, really, really bad, right?
I hear you. I hear you. And I wanted to know because I mean I get these are the questions I get is like that, and I get a lot of student visa working questions like because a lot of people want to open an LLC when they're like on a student visa and like work in an online business, what's the risk for a student visa if they are working on the internet on in a contractor basis while in the U.S.? What's the risk from an
That
immigration
is
standpoint?
that is one of the most contended debates right now in the immigration world right now. It's specifically what you just said, because the law is pretty clear in the states where it says that you as a student cannot be working or be employed by an employer. But now, if you're on the internet and let's say you're working for a company outside of the United States, right? Is it considered like you're working here in the United States or not? Some people say yes. Some other people say no, and this is this discussion that attorneys have all the time. We tend to go with the more conservative route, just so there's no problems, because immigration is very subjective and discretionary. So it's better not to sort of poke the bear. Another thing is going to be almost impossible, I would think, for the government to have the resources to be overseeing and try to see which person who's on a student visa is on the internet
It's
working, right?
impossible, right?
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I would never advise you to do that. I would never advise you, to do something that is illegal in here. But that is a very
Well, it's
sort
hard
of
to like not work, especially when you're in school. You have so much free time, and then you're like
right.
working. And I get the same question. It's like, James, I'm here on a student visa, so here's a little clip, right? When you're on a student visa, you're not a U.S. resident for tax purposes, which is to say your days don't count towards a substantial presence test. So if you're here on a student visa, you wouldn't become a U.S. tax resident and have to pay tax on your worldwide income. So student
Right.
visa is a very attractive option for people
Correct.
who want to try out the U.S., especially if they're very wealthy. But here's the rub that I don't know how to answer either. The people say, how do I basically I have an LLC. I'm on a student visa. I have an LLC and I'm making money. What should I do on my taxes? And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess technically you should file and pay taxes on everything, but like even the form on how you do it, if you're not a resident, you're doing a 1040 NR saying it's effectively connected income to U.S. trade or business. And if you're getting paid by foreign countries while in the U.S., it's like hard. There's not a good mechanism for even reporting it. So it's like a really complicated way for someone to even report that income. So oftentimes like it's the same thing. It's like they're not going to know about it. I mean, maybe if you're using U.S. bank accounts, they could find out. They
Yeah,
mean the government.
I would guess so. I mean, look, there's some people. Look, there's some people who are just very sort of, there's no crossing this line. I don't care if it's on the internet, and I don't care if it's a company outside of the United States. Like, you're in a student visa, you're inside the United States. Like, you're not supposed to be working. That's it, right? But like you said, I mean, it'll be almost, I think, such a tremendous job for the government to try to figure that out. Like, I don't
It's
even
a
know
trim, and also like it's kind of weird to like not like what I've seen in the U.S. tax code is that in the instructions is that there's a lot of it says you can't work on a student visa, but oftentimes I read it as if it's implied that you can't work for a U.S. company. It doesn't specifically say only a U.S. company, but you can work for someone else. But it doesn't say you can't work for someone else. It just says broad strokes you can't work, and it says
yeah,
that when we're talking about FDAP income on the U.S. tax thing, like
right.
what's withholdable income, and
So,
then
so like I said, I don't mean to interrupt you. So then there is a separate school of thought, right, of attorneys, because I mean we're all together in different groups and chats and all that stuff. So we're always discussing stuff. And there's another school of thought that says this isn't work. You know what I mean? This is a different company. I mean, this
that's what
is
I'm
not
saying.
in the United
It's not
States.
work. It's not.
It's
It's
not
not. It's
work.
not like
Like,
from that definition. It's not a.
yeah,
It's not work from that definition. Yeah.
that's what they would argue. But once again, I personally, if you're doing something like that, I just would not. I would advise not to do that. But people are going to do what people are going to do, obviously, sometimes.
I mean, I used to advise people here on a student visa not to do any work at all. Like when you're in school, you're not doing and that's the thing. Like you could have other companies. A lot of people put companies in the name of their relatives and just like technically do the work for it, but they're not getting paid because it's someone else's company, or you like offshore or something.
Right.
there's a lot of different ways to go through it, and
I mean, look, when all this was written, right, the internet wasn't a thing, right? It's not. It wasn't. And even if the internet, I don't really remember the time when all those different statutes were passed. I forget, but regardless, it was definitely you know before the internet boom, and definitely before the internet boom in the sense of people being able to work from anywhere across the world, so long as you have a laptop, and for anybody across the world, right? So I mean, they weren't thinking about this type of stuff, right, when this was written. So it's sort of like a once again, it's just a legal debate, and then some attorneys say no, there's and it's black and white. You can't work, and some other ones say, well, I don't think this is work. They're working for a company outside the states, etc. So yeah, but just to sort of finish off what you were saying, I mean, the ability to be here on the student visa, and not only obviously get the opportunity to see if you like the country, or even potentially start exploring potential businesses and all that, right? um, Gives you the time to explore options that are available to you to become a resident, or sort of switch up to a different visa that's going to allow you to stay here for longer and work here. So I think the student visa is a great tool to do that.
I think so too. And I would be the. I mean, personally, I'd be the guy that comes in on a student visa and works the whole time myself. But um, it's it's risk reward. Like, what's so that's great. So what's the worst case scenario? You just get your visa gets revoked. You get sent home, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a specific, question, and obviously you have to like answer it. And if you answer it in the positive, as I mean, you should always be honest. It's all discretionary, right? So yeah, that could be grounds for a denial of any other visa, and it should be grounds for, depending on the officer, to potentially, cancel the current visa, or even put you in removal proceedings. Like it really depends on the officer, to be quite honest, right? Uh,
Well, I guess the worst case from the U.S. side is that you have to pay taxes on everything. I mean, which is like kind of a fair expected thing.
yeah,
You're paying taxes
there's
everywhere else.
there's some exceptions to it. There's a rule called 245K, and essentially it gives an exception to people who are applying for certain visas, like the EB1s and the EB2s, and they're doing adjustment of status, meaning like they're inside of the states and they want to, switch up. And for example, if you stayed here over the limit they gave you in your tourist visa, or you worked within a period of 6 months, right after your visa ended, then you can take this exception of, the 245K
The two four
law,
five
and then
k exception.
it basically forgives, it doesn't automatically do it, but you can apply for it, and it forgives either you overstaying your visa for up to 180 days, or one of them also working without a work permit. So you can utilize that as well.
Okay, I like that. That's a really obscure little name drop there. The
Yeah.
245K. Good for you, man. You know about how to help the ciegos out there who need to get their adjustment of status for the EB1. That has to be kind of a rare thing, like a rare
Well,
occurrence.
sometimes people, they determine that they do want to stay here, and it's been a couple of months, and like the work can be done that quick sometimes. So then they go a little bit past the time that they were allowed to come in, but we submit that with that exception. And I mean, typically we don't have an issue.
Sweet. Um, so I'm just playing around. I'm just like looking at the stream from YouTube, and I'm like watching it also while we're on here just to see like what it looks like.
I gotta put it on myself.
Yeah, because since we're just getting started, boosting it, making sure more people can see it, because it's really going to just be going to the people who've seen the foundation before.
Right.
Um, so any new breaking news with the on the immigration front? Anything that happened this week?
Um. Well, this week we're not seeing anything new. We're still finally, like I think last week we talked about this new program that they've implemented for basically parole for Venezuelans. So they sort of rolled out the processes and all that. And a lot of people have had questions about that. But essentially, that's for people who, are in Venezuela right now. Like they want to come over here, legally, and they don't want to cross, undocumented, like a lot of them are doing. And then, that's sort of like the hot topic right now, right? Um, Aside from that, well, uh, that's about it. I mean, that's a lot of news regarding Venezuela, and then obviously Brazil because of the elections. We're starting to get once again like an uptick of people who are inquiring about different type of visas and stuff like that. So that's pretty much what's going on right now in the immigration world.
Sweet, man.
Yep.
Um, I wanted to. Here's a question I get all the time too. Um, what should I say to USCIS when they ask me if I have a U.S. business when I'm coming in as a tourist and I have an LLC? Like, so
Right.
basically, clients, like I have clients that I help get LLCs from outside the country, and USCIS asks if they're here on business, and they're so proud of their company and their thing, and they're like, yeah, I have an LLC, it's amazing, and because of people like just tell everyone everything, and basically, is I had one client get in trouble for it, and they got their visa, they got their tourist visa revoked.
Yeah.
And, I basically tell everyone not to bring it up because in the context of they're not really doing business in the U.S. and they're just going to confuse the officers because they don't really know what they're doing. They don't understand this concept.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. I mean, look, not even in theory, in reality, the most people that are coming in, for example, with the tourist visas, like they have what it's called a B1, B2 visa, right? The B1 stands for business, right? So now it's not business like the other visas, like the investment visas, or you can actually like work here and get a business, live here, and all that. But what it entails is that you, as a businessman, can come in with that visa, right? And then you can do businessman, businesswomen stuff. I'm gonna go meet with my great accountant, Jim. I'm gonna go, talk to my biggest provider. I'm gonna go, talk close a couple of contracts with some potential clients. All that is permitted, right? What's not permitted is obviously like working, right? Say you're working for a company in here, and you're absolutely right. So the fact that some people don't know how to express themselves pretty well when they're entering the port to the officers might get them in trouble because they might, make it seem as if they're, they have their LLC in here, which is nothing wrong with that. You've done thousands of them with bank accounts and all that, but you're not working here, right?
Yeah, you're not working here. That's the
You're
whole
not
point.
working here, so you have to, it's not a matter of like you're lying, right? But like I mean, you have to know exactly how to phrase what you're doing correctly. Like you're here visiting, but you're not working. You're just gonna go meet up with certain people that you need to meet for your business, and also do tourist stuff as well, right? So yeah, so it's something that it could be a little tricky sometimes for some people that don't understand what they're saying to the officers, right?
Do you have any questions for me about like what um about the tax portion of this? Like anything you wanted to know? I mean, we're just having a conversation. We're not like um
Um, well, I mean, look, to be quite honest, I mean, I guess most of the my questions have to deal with how easy has it been, or have you seen that banks are able to sort of allow these people who create their entities, right, and are getting paid from across the world through these entities, American entities and bank accounts. Has it been sort of like an easy thing? I know you've done a lot of them, but I don't know. Like, is the banking system being more open here in America to that type of stuff? And I guess a follow up question will be, if you can tell me a little bit about these sort of internet based banks, not your most typical ones like your Bank of Americas and Chases that we're so used to people using, that seem to be like helping out a lot of people and making it easier for them to get paid and do their businesses.
yeah, great question. I mean, I think it comes down to two things. It really comes down to the fact that these are all, for-profit businesses that want more clients, and they have to balance that with the KYC regulations and guidelines to manage their risks. So they're for-profit businesses, so they want more clients, but they also need to manage their risk. And with the digitalization of information and also the required information to open accounts, they, with a passport, they basically have an important government document, and they can see what you're doing, and basically they have the power to close your account at any time if they suspect any interesting or any like potential fraudulent stuff going on. So the risk is kind of low for the banks, and with the availability of information, it's I've seen, I expect it to be easier to open accounts for these people, and really they're for-profit businesses. They want people to like open accounts, obviously. And what's interesting is the rise of the fintech banks, because really all it is a platform being built and then integrating a bank into it. So I've seen a new one just popped up the other day, Dula. You can open a company and an online bank account, and they do it, and they have their own little fintech bank. I don't know what they're working with, but there's a lot of these softwares coming up. So it's basically they create a software platform. They integrate a banking license and a bank account into it with an API, and they're able to get automate and get all the information required to accept deposits. And I'm really jealous. I mean, I want one too. I think it's more important for me to probably pivot around the the banking thing. There's a lot of capital usually required. These are all startups that are generally opening these fintech banks, but there's money. There's a whole world worth of money that would love to use that would love to just have bank accounts in US dollars. And also there's a whole bunch of lazy people like me, not lazy, but I don't like going to the bank. So if you're going to give me a bank I can open 10 times out of 10 and not go to the bank, and it has all the access, I can open multiple accounts, it has cool tech around it, I'm going to use that. I don't care how many branches a bank has. I hope
Right.
to never have to go to the bank.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thought around it, and I'm hoping that we can have more and more freedom and more access with less and less government oversight. That's my kind of the idea for me, which I really like, but I don't know how I think that's going to intersect at some point where there's going to be like a higher demand of oversight. Actually, it's coming with the Corporate Transparency Act. So Corporate Transparency Act update I want to give you right now is that they came with final regulations, and it's going to be implemented at like January 1st, 2025, I think was the date, or 2024. You can follow me on the other medias, and I'll talk about it more. Excuse the odd, but the Corporate Transparency Act is going to require every foreign company, every company with more than 25% foreign owners, to register with FinCEN and disclose who the foreign ownership. So that's going to create a lot more. And the FinCEN is a financial crimes network, financial network of I don't even know, financial enforcement network for financial crimes. So that's what they do, and they're all about, and that's all of the risks that we're talking about is financial crime, and also it's transcribing. If you're in Facebook, it transcribes, and also like terrorist financing. So I should probably even say that word because it's gonna flag our video, but that's it. I think that's coming up soon, but that's still 2025. The government didn't pass the thing where banks disclose every transaction over $600, like the people are required to disclose it. So that's a separate thing there. I'm going to probably do a lot more 1099s this year.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting, but still some time to prepare, right? Until
yeah, man, we have like a year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah.
And yeah, dude, we actually got some people in the video now watching. That's awesome. I'm happy if you're live. If you're here on the stream, comment if you have any questions. Happy to answer your questions. We also could probably do some of this in Spanish, but whatever. We'll do that another time. Maybe we'll do that every other week. We'll do it in Spanish. We have a whole combo in Spanish.
For sure. We can
do that. That's going to be much less me talking, more of you talking when we're in Spanish.
It's all right. It's fine. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you have any other questions, but if not, I think for our viewers, it would be good if you can sort of in advance start writing to the foundation. That way, we have a bunch of questions that we can go over, and then we'll have a list, and we can just go over each and one of those questions and hopefully, answer those questions for the people that have been watching us. Okay.
I love it, man. Yeah, I don't have a ton prepared today, so I'm not just going to ramble and go on all day. I think we can just cut it short today, and I think the consistency is what's important. So, thanks for showing up, Joaquin.
Of course, of course. We'll
Thanks
be
for
here
being
next
here, buddy.
week. And I was thinking maybe next week we can, just go over a little bit more in depth of like each visa, right? Like we've overall been talking about the general stuff, right? Different routes, but not specifics and details. So maybe we'll do that, and then hopefully we can get more questions from the people that are watching on the stream.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think we'll go through. We have those different pages. We have all the resources on our website, the U.S. Immigration Foundation. We have a ton of stuff. So maybe we'll just go through all of the visas in order and just spend a whole day on one visa and have certain examples and have case studies and have stuff that we go
Sure.
over, and we can chop that up and make that digestible and have like a main series about it and just really call it, U.S. Immigration Talks, the EB1 visa, and we'll number two. So we'll have like we'll go through it. So. I don't know if we start with EB1 or if we start at the other side with the EB15, because
Yeah,
or the
we can go from
EB57
the top to bottom or from bottom to top. It doesn't matter. I mean,
until
hopefully,
like in a year from now when we're 52 weeks in, we're at
yeah,
the Q7
halfway
visa
point.
that applies for people that are missing an arm but only have six fingers on the other hand, and they can come in because they're making special gloves for people like those really really obscure visas that like 100 people a year apply for. There's a lot of those, right?
There's a bunch of different visas, man. There's seasonal visas as well that not too many people know about. I mean, there's just a ton.
People,
There's
people
stream
that only pick grapes, like
visas.
people like yeah.
There's a ton. But we'll go over the stuff, and like I said, the best thing will be if we get some of our people who are watching us sort of send in these questions so we can answer them for them.
Cool, dude. Well, thanks for being here, and I'll see all of you guys on the next live next week, next Monday between 9 and 11 a.m.
Yes,
Eastern time.
sir. All
Okay.
right.